welcome to another episode of Making the Past Present, where today we make 2 sauces. On today's episode of Making the Past Present, we will be doing 2 different recipes. Both recipes come from Richard Briggs's The English Art of Cookery, one of my favorite cookbooks, obviously, because most of my recipes have been coming from him. But it is called a fennel sauce and then a parsley sauce. And the reason we're doing both together at the same time is they are very easy to do and make. So what you want to do is grab some fennel. This is what fennel looks like. You can grow it, or in my case, I would rather buy it. Now, if you grow it, I will warn you, this is one of the favorites for monarchs and a bunch of other butterflies. So when you go out to snip, be very careful where you snip because they will bite. Anyway, so the recipe says to take a handful, looks like a handful to me, and chop it into pieces. I'm going to go big pieces because it'll be easier, because the next thing we have to do is to blanch it. So I want it in big pieces so it's easier for me to pull out, and that's what the recipe also says to do. Before we move on, now you have this head of head of fennel. There are a lot of things you can do with this. Do not throw this part away. It is just as good. Fresh, you can throw it into salads. Now, what I'm telling you is not necessarily 18th century. I'll tell you when it is. But in the modern world, this is great in celery, or in salads. It's a lot like celery. You can throw it into your soups, into roast. This is great with, say, turkey or a beef roast. Take it and you slice it just like you would celery and throw it in. It will need cleaned, obviously, and there are outside layers, a lot like an onion, that you can peel off, but make sure to clean it because it grows in the dirt. Now, in the 18th century, they used this part quite a bit. You will see a lot of recipes, especially with roast, that will call for 6, 7, 8 heads of fennel. This is a head of fennel. You go, you buy the stuff with the fronds, chop the fronds off. Now, this is your head. Now, what you can do is, if you only need this part, cut the greeny top parts off, and you can throw them into a Ziploc bag before you get to the event, and you can freeze it and use it later. If you want to carry it to an event, I love to carry it to an event whole, because a lot of people don't know that the two go together. You don't see it a lot together. It's a great way to have a talking point to get people interested in what you're doing. Same thing at an event. Slice it off and either immediately use it in this sauce or pop it in a bag and put it in your cooler to help preserve it till after the event. So again, like anything, you cut off the end, clean it, peel off the outside layers, slice it like celery, throw it. A lot of times you'll see it with beef roast. Sometimes turkeys, they'll tell you to make a fennel sauce, which is 8 fennel heads mixed in this complicated sauce, which eventually we will get to, and then you roast the turkey with it, and it's fantastic. I've tried to make just the sauce. It is really good, and it smells a lot like licorice. So do not throw this away. If you're not going to get to use this part, like the fronds on top, you can freeze it. Clean it first, peel it first, leave it as whole as you possibly can, and then freeze it. And it will last a couple of weeks in your freezer before it starts to do really, really weird, funky things. So do not get rid of this. It still can be used. So we have the beginnings of our fennel sauce. The next one is our parsley sauce, which it says take a handful of parsley. So we'll go... You see why I have rosemary in here. This is why I buy bunches and bunches of parsley. You can either twist it off like that, or let me find them. Most vendors at an 18th century or any historical event will sell these kind of scissors. They are period correct. They are great. You can buy a pair. You'll use them for a lot of things. If you don't want to try and rip it off and make a mess, you can just cut a handful. And if you still have the stems, or as you see I still have some green, do not get rid of them. They can be used. The stems are great to throw into your stock because it adds all the parsley flavor, but then you can scoop the stems out and you have a clear broth. So according to the recipe, you just leave it like this. So we have some boiling water. I am going to grab, hold on a second. I'm going to grab a plate and a dish towel. It's just a cotton dish towel. This way it'll help wick some water away. And what we are getting ready to do is called blanching, where you just drop it in boiling water and you cook it just for a couple of seconds to get usually a very bright color, a very bright color, it just makes it look a lot prettier. Oh, gotta stir my mushrooms while I'm out here too. So as you can see, my water is boiling, so I'm going to start with the parsley. Just drop it in, have a slotted spoon of some kind or a pair of tongs if you're doing this at home, and see how very quickly it turns almost a neon green. Just as quickly as you drop it in, you want to start pulling it out because you don't want to overcook it, because then you lose a lot of the flavor, texture, and all the pretty stuff that is parsley. Now don't worry if you don't get all the parts out. It's not a big deal. Or in this case, a big dill. Yeah, anyway. I'll leave the jokes to Dad.
I wouldn't even touch that one.
Try to get as much of the parsley out as you can. This water, I'm probably just going to do hard-boiled eggs in, so if you don't get all of it out, don't worry about it. It'll turn your eggshells pretty green. So then drop your fennel in. And again, you see how very quickly it turns a very, very bright green. Ooh, that's hot. And again, almost, if your water is boiling, almost immediately you want to pull it out. I'm not too worried about these sticks because I'm not really going to use them. Oop. Okay, well, I'm going to sit this over here and let it cool so I can handle it. But while it is cooling, I'm going to put my pipkin on, which, by the way, I have had soaking about 20 minutes because it is a form of redware, and any redware that you are going to be using needs to soak for at least 20 minutes before you put it on heat. This is the first time I've gotten to use this one. It was a gift from Brandon Scott and his mom Pat Scott and his beautiful girlfriend, who all of a sudden I've completely forgotten her name. I am so sorry. Please don't hit me when you see me next time. It was a gift. They gave it to me at Fort Fred. Someone was getting out of reenacting and I was gifted all of her cooking implements. So that's what I'm using, and this will be used for another dish too later. But we're going to let the butter melt to finish the sauces. I would highly suggest when you are at an event, look to see if Eagle Talon Traders are there. That's Brandon Scott's beautiful setup. He has all kinds of fabrics and books and ribbons and there. I spend quite a bit of time there, and they are very helpful. If you have questions, they'll help you figure out what you need, how to get you started, who to get you connected with. They are working very hard to help out with Sampson Historical's beautiful historical market fair that is coming up in September in Lebanon, Indiana. Check them out, visit, talk, tell them I sent you. You will not be disappointed. They do a lot with the Native Americans. They sell a lot of the beadwork, a lot of the beads to do the beadwork. They sell a lot of the gorgets, the fabrics, the wool you need. Go talk to them. You won't be disappointed. Definitely check out their books. Amazing collection of books. I usually walk away with a stack of books, not counting the fabric. So go check them out. Like I said, this was a gift from them. Tell them hi, tell them I sent you. You will not be disappointed. So as you can see, the butter is almost completely melted now. I have 3 sticks in here, and the reason I have so much butter is because I'm doing 2 sauces at once. Now, when you start making this particular kind of sauce, you can decide how much butter you want to use per herb, and then this will also help you decide how many herbs you want to use. Now, why I have it off the heat is it was bubbling and boiling, so I know it's quite hot, but by taking it off, it's starting to cool, but it's still hot enough. It melted the sticks of butter without being over the heat, and I'm less likely to then burn said butter. So let's go finish these sauces real quick, and we'll talk about what you can do with them. Now you're going to see me set the butter on the ground because it is so hot. I don't want to potentially burn myself or anything else. So I'm going to set it off to the side.
Watch where you step.
Yes. So let's finish the sauces. So I'm going to start with parsley. Now parsley, oh look, it dyed my towel a pretty color. Now parsley is my favorite, so I tend to go way overboard with my parsley. But the recipe says to chop it. It doesn't say fine, it just says chop it into pieces. Now Now the parsley is still quite warm, so just be careful. So I'm going to kind of go in, and that looks good. And I'm going to put it into a container. I might not use all of it. Yeah, I'm not going to use all of it. Even if you don't use all of this, don't get rid of it. It can cool, it can be thrown into something else. Parsley is great to throw into your potatoes. So always, never throw away the herbs if you can help it. It'd be great. Now, I have a lot of these stalks from the fennel. I didn't think to pick them out. If you have time and you think about it, pick them out. Don't blanch them like I did. Save them with the head. It can work as part of the head. So I'm just going to pick through and get the nice frond part. This is why you don't hurry while you cook. Remind me of that when I'm hurrying at an event. And it says to do basically the same thing, chop it into pieces. Now it says to do large pieces. I'm going to do smaller pieces just because I'm going to try to avoid getting parsley in my teeth. Or sorry, fennel in my teeth. And it makes it a little bit nicer to today's way we like to do it. I'm going to move this out of the way. I'm going to put it in another container. Now your butter does not have to be cool. It can still be warm, that's fine. Looks like I've been mowing grass. So, then you take your butter. Now remember, there are no measurements to this. And you pour it over to turn it into a sauce. Whoop. Careful not to overfill. Perfect. So I'm going to assume it's about 1.5 sticks per each one. I'm going to carefully, gently stir it around. And you can chop the herbs finer if you want. It's entirely up to you. I'm trying to follow the recipe the best that I can. So there's your sauce. Now, the cookbook does not tell you how you can use it. However, as you go through recipes, you will find use a parsley butter sauce. It would have been nice to have it farther back, but that's not how 18th century recipes necessarily work. So here's some suggestions. Fennel goes great with fish. So if you're making a fish dish at an event, or if you're doing it at home, you can do this ahead of time. You can also melt it, put it in your fridge till it hardens. I would suggest putting it in a plastic container because it's easier to pop out, or line a plastic container with parchment paper. Pour your butter once it's cooled to where you can touch it. It's still going to be liquid, but it's not going to be boiling. Pour it in, you can pop it in your fridge and it can reharden, and it makes it easier to make a compound butter. But if you're wanting to use it as it's melted, this is great over fish. You can do it with pork. At home, you can put it on popcorn. Not that I've ever done that, but I do that all the time. Now the parsley butter, you can use it for a lot more things. A lot of times the mashed potato recipes will say to have your butter pre-melted. Well, here's a great way to pre-melt your butter and already herb it up. Do the two together, you can dump it in. It's great over beef, it's really good over pork, it's good over fish. You can do certain dumplings. There is one called a barm dumpling, which is basically you make a bread recipe and you boil it like you would a fritter or a dumpling, and then you're supposed to serve it in butter. You can dump either one of these over that and it's fantastic. Now I used unsalted butter because I tend to prefer that flavor. If you're going to pour it on something like a bread, I would suggest you using half salted, half unsalted. Sometimes you need just that little bit of salt. If you're going to throw it into potatoes, use the unsalted, add the salt to the potatoes as you're mashing them. Unsalted tends to work better because salted sometimes can be too salted and then it can ruin a dish. I've tried it. I've had it ruin cookies. I've had it ruin mashed potatoes. I know, I can't believe I'm saying it. It ruined mashed potatoes, but it did. Go stick to the unsalted. It's a lot better to add your own salt to it later. So you can, again, either one of these is great on things like popcorn. At home, you can fry things in it. If you're doing it at home, it's really fancy and neat. If for like the holidays, you make this and you pour it into, you pour it into a gravy boat and you sit it out on the table next to the mashed potatoes or whatever else you're serving, and then it looks really neat and you pass it around. Just make sure whatever you're putting it into is heat safe. You can do little metal ones. That's probably better because it's going to be hot, but you don't have to worry about it cracking something. If you're like me and collect the fancy old German porcelain, it could potentially crack it if it's too hot. So again, let it cool a little bit before you pour it in. You can use it as a base of gravies. You can throw it in just about anything. You can use it for anything, but these are some of the base sauces that they talk about. Some of the easier ones, that's why we did 2 together for 1. So parsley and fennel. Fun? Give it a try. Thanks for watching, Making the Past Present.
Two sauces.
Did I do that?
Yeah.
Anyway, today on Making the Past
Actually, you didn't.
This is why you don't work with family.
I'm just testing. Anyway.